And we study environmental toxicants and their effects on ovulation and female fertility. Like Franny said, she's going to kind of take the lead tonight, but I will be here if you guys have any questions for me too. So, yeah.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, yeah, so I wanted to add in just like a poster that I've done just as like a primer. Not saying it's perfect, obviously there's flaws, but this is a poster that I was going to present at Incur last spring. It got canceled, unfortunately, but definitely going to be editing it for Incur this spring. But yeah, so this is just some work that I've done and kind of like a classic setup of what a poster presentation is going to look like. And then, so why is having a good setup and a good poster and an effective research poster important? I'd be happy to hear from anyone if they think that they know why this is super important, why we feel the need to like teach students about how to do this properly.
I would say the first thing that catches your eye about a poster is how presentable it is and I guess concise it is. So if it's easier to read, it would make people want to look at it more.
Oops. Yeah, so that's super true. Honestly, the first thing that comes to my mind is you are presenting your poster because you want to get the word out about your research. You want to share what you found with other people. And what's going to make people interested in what you're talking about is your poster. It's what they're going to see, it's what's going to draw them in. If there's a messy poster or something that isn't as pleasing, someone might pass it by and then they don't get to hear about what you've been doing. So it's really important just so that you can effectively get what you've been studying and what you've been working so hard on out to other people. So a good research poster is going to answer these questions. Obviously, there's more specific ones for each topic, but these are like main points that you want your poster to address. And that's going to be, what is the research question? That's number one. Like, what are you talking about? What are you trying to figure out? What is your research trying to answer? Why is this question important? I think this one is super, super important because a lot of the research that we do is very specific towards our own, kind of thing that we study. And so a lot of people might not understand why that's important. They might not be educated on the subject. They might just not understand, like, why they should care about it. And so I think it's really important for you to address why you're studying this, especially because you're going to be presenting a lot of times to people who aren't professionals. They don't know about your topic, so they don't really know why they should care. And then you always want to have your methods on there. And why are these methods unique, important? So why did you use those methods? How does this relate to other scholarly work or research in the field? This is always big with the what are the next steps too. So you found this out. What can we do with this information? So what comes next? Why, again, that leads back to why is this important? What question is this going to answer? And if you guys have questions, feel free to like stop me and speak up. So a big thing with poster planning is, are you going to present virtually or in person? You need to choose your poster style and size. Size is a huge thing because the dimensions of your poster will mess up the whole format. So you want to make sure before you get started that you know exactly what dimensions and style of poster you want to make, because it's going to save you a lot of time in the end if you have to change your dimensions to fit. So we typically use PowerPoint or Google Slides to make a poster. It's the easiest way to do it. PowerPoint is definitely a lot more user-friendly. I've had some major technical difficulties with Google Slides, especially because I've always presented with a partner or someone else. And so it's easier to use Google Slides in the fact that you could both edit it. But it is a little sketchy to use, and we'll talk about that later on with some of the examples. But we do have templates available on our website, which is really great. I'm going to click this, and I might have to stop sharing, and then I'm going to share here. So Everyone can see my screen, right? Is it good?
Yes,
Yeah.
you're good.
Okay. So if you're looking for your poster template, just go to our.uky.edu, and then you're going to go to this For Students tab.
Resources.
Oh, the resources tab. You can also get to it for the For Students because I did this earlier, but you go to resources, and then view poster printing details. It's the first one that comes up. And then if you scroll all the way down, we have some examples on the website as well as templates that you can download. And so there's different templates in different dimensions. So the 36 by 44, I'm pretty sure that's like a pretty standard dimension. And then they have the square 36 by 36. This is the more like classic poster design. And then they also have, it's kind of like a more modern Morrison design. And they have those in 2 different dimensions as well. So if you don't know where to get started, this would be a great place to start. So let me go back to our PowerPoint. Okay. So another thing, after you figure out what template you want to use, what design you're going to use, a good design, it makes an effective poster, and that gives you an effective way to talk about what you've been working on. You want to decide on one concept or question, and this is really important because a lot of the things we're studying are very specific to our knowledge. They're very complex questions. You could be studying multiple different questions. You could be looking at multiple different things. It's really good to hone your poster in onto one thing because you really don't have a lot of room on a poster. It may seem like you have a lot of space for information. You really don't. Once you get down to it, you don't have room for words. And so you really want to focus on one concept and put your whole poster on that focus. It gets really like jumbly and people might get lost or not understand if you have more than one concept or question being addressed in a poster. And your poster should stand alone. This is also very important. Someone outside your field should be able to read through your poster and understand the main points without further explanation. This is a little different, I think, than what a lot of people are used to in a presentation. Because I guess with school, usually when you do a presentation with PowerPoint, it's supposed to be like 1 or 2 words on the PowerPoint and then you explain and talk about it. And so looking at the PowerPoint by itself, you may not be able to get it. With a poster, you want minimum words, but you want it to be able to be powerful on its own. And someone can come up, read it, and understand what's going on without you having to explain it. Okay, so now we're moving on to some examples. This is that traditional layout. That's kind of how I did my poster in the beginning. And we have 2 different examples of that. This left one is like a more classic example. One thing that's really important that's outlined here with these arrows is the flow. You really want your poster to work in like a logical way. You want someone to be able to, their eyes to move in the general direction that your information is flowing. So that's something important to remember when you're designing your layout. And then this one on the right is a little less traditional, but it's still effective and it's still really nice to look at. And there's still a really nice flow and the information is really organized. And so that is 2 good examples. And then on the bottom here, how it says the layout flow goes from left to right, top to bottom. It's kind of up to you how you want your flow to go. You can do it from like left to right, like across the top, or you can do it up and down. That's not like a super huge issue, but you just want some sort of direction in your poster. And so this is the Morrison design. This is also like a perfectly acceptable layout for a poster presentation. This one's actually pretty interesting. I haven't done a poster in this orientation, but I really like it. Your main finding goes in the middle, and it's really big. And so then that kind of like the first thing that people see is your main point and the emphasis and what you want to be talking about. And then on the sides, you have your supporting information. It's still going to have a flow with an intro, methods, results, figures, acknowledgments, that kind of thing. And there was templates to both on the website. So it's kind of up to you in your research for what layout fits best. And then these are some examples of people who have used the Morrison template layout. They're both really nice to look at. The one on the left is the one where the center has the main point, and then it has the supporting information around it. And it kind of reads from top to bottom, left to right. And then the second one is the more vertical orientation. Again, it still has that flow through it. And the main point is at the top. Okay, so this is really important because I think this is something that's different for like a poster presentation. You really want to make sure you have the right text sizes, because I know when I first went to write a poster, I wanted to put it in like 12 font Times New Roman and start typing. Well, when it gets printed on a poster, it's literally going to be like you have to read it with a magnifying glass. So, like it says here, you really want your like titles big across the top, 85 point. Like I know that sounds huge, but that's really what you want it in. The authors that go under the title, 56. And these are all like suggestions. Like if 85 isn't quite like right for you, you can do it like, you know, a little bit around there. They just suggest for subheadings 36, body text 24. I think whenever I went back to look at my poster when I put it in here, my body text I think was in 29 point font. So it's kind of like around there, but you definitely want it to be readable once it's printed. So definitely not that 12 point font. Okay, this is another really important point. I know it's really fun when you're designing posters. You want to have like pretty colors on it. You want to make it, especially really creative people, you want to like make it your own. But a white background is usually best. The point of your poster is to get the information across to other people. And when you have like distracting colors or a background, it makes it really hard for people to focus on the information being presented. So although you want it to be pretty and pleasing to the eye, you want to keep it simple with your background, light color, make it easy to read. One of the really big flags is you want to avoid red-green, as red-green color blindness is common. So we tend to want to avoid those. I know with UK, I know blue is a really common color used just because the UK logo is required to be on your poster. And so the blue is already on there, kind of like goes nicely, but you just want to be consistent in your color scheme, avoid red, green, and keep your background pretty simple. So your graphics and photos, same thing with the font. You want these to be able to be seen. So you don't want them to be like itty bitty. You want them to be pretty big, something that people are going to be able to read. And you have to remember, if you have like legends on your graphs, that needs to be read too. So you want to make sure those legends are big enough that the writing in the legend is going to be readable. They have a little thing, they want it to be at least 3 feet away that you could read it, just like a thing to go off of. So on your poster, your text should support the graphics, not vice versa. So this is a huge thing, especially with word to picture ratio. You really want your graphics, your actual data, your research, like what you're talking about, to be the main focus. You don't want the little tiny words to be what someone's going to read, because if you think about someone looking at your poster, their eyes aren't going to be drawn to the little sentences. They're going to be drawn to the big graphics that you have on there. So your text should be supporting those graphics and that data and what you're presenting in the images, versus them just being supplementary to your words. And then you just want to make sure you're using heavy lines and tables and graphs for easier viewing. So you want to make sure when you have that flow going that it is easy for someone's eyes to follow like where it's supposed to be going and where each section cuts off. And so this is something important. This is going to be on every poster. You want your title very large. It doesn't have to be at the top, like in the Morrison design, it's located elsewhere, but you want your title to be large and something that people are going to see. One of the first things they're going to see. And then below that, you want the authors. And right here, it's really important to make sure you're crediting your mentor and whoever you're doing work under. They worked really hard, to get their degree and keep these labs going. So you want to make sure you have their names on there. And then you want to make sure you have the department that you're working under in the University of Kentucky. Also affiliations. So like I said, the required UK logo needs to be on there. So this is something, it kind of looks like the one on here that you'll see on a lot of posters. It's kind of like the classic setup of your title. And then the actual content of your poster. I think this is like kind of self-explanatory. You need your intro. It's kind of like an abstract / background. Why is this important? Why am I studying this? Why do I care about what's going on in this poster? Methods. This is typically seen in like bullet points because you don't really want it to be like dense, but your main points of how you did this. Data and results. Maybe incomplete, and that's okay. I know for me, I'm in the middle of working on a project this semester. So when I present my research, my project most likely will not be done, but it's okay. Research is ever going, so don't panic. But your data and results, this section should be where it's like your graphic heavy and then words are supporting that. So this section, think data or whatever your research is on in an image type of thing. And then conclusions and future work. I think this is really important to summarize the importance of what you found in your research and what that information can do in the future. And then you always want to have references and acknowledgments. This section can be really small. I think a lot of times it's seen like kind of really tiny in a corner, just because there's not a lot of room left, but you always want to have that on your poster no matter what. So these are just some reminders. Keep it short and simple. Like I said, you think you have this whole big poster, but you really don't have a lot of room. Also remember, not everyone reading your poster is going to be a professional with the terms and stuff that you're using. Remove all non-essential information. That's super important for keeping the space that you need. Attract visual attention. This is really good with the setup of your photos and graphics, the flow, make it appealing to the eye. And this content goal, I think this is important to note, the 20% empty space. I know your research will be really complex and you have a lot of information, but you don't want your page to be so jam-packed that there's no white space left. So you want to make sure that you have at least 20% empty white space. That way it's not scary for someone to come up and look at. You want 45% photos and graphics and 35% text. So then again, photos and graphics, heavy, text supporting those photos. Okay, so editing, this is a huge thing. One of those things where I say don't wait till last minute to put your poster together, because it is pretty frustrating, I guess, just making everything work in the format. And so you want to make sure that you work closely with your mentor and making sure that the content is correct, accurate, it's appropriate, as well as the layout. Make sure it's something that they approve of. And I would think of this less as let me finish the poster and send it to my mentor, but more of like an ongoing process. So you do your intro, you do your methods, send it to your mentor, make sure it's okay before moving on. This would probably be like a several step like editing process. Make sure to proofread and spell check. That is like with everything. I know with the virtual presentations, your poster isn't getting printed, but with printed posters, that spelling error is going to be printed on your poster forever. So you really want to make sure that you take your time and make sure you don't have mistakes like that. And consult with people outside your field of research. Does it make sense to them? This is also another thing that I really recommend. I mean, I was telling Jesse the other day, like the amount of times that I have presented my research to my roommates, and none of them are science majors, but they could probably tell you all about my research just because I want to make sure people who aren't familiar with what I'm studying are going to be able to understand and appreciate what I'm talking about and what I'm researching. So find someone who's going to listen, um, and maybe make sure it's towards the end of your like editing process. That way you don't bore them too much with mistakes, but consult people and make sure that everything makes sense because they might point out a sentence. I know it's happened to me a lot that says like, I don't even know what you just said, like it went in one ear and out the other. So maybe try and rephrase that. And I think that's a really important step in your editing process. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is kind of interactive. So I want you guys to like speak up. We're gonna go through some poster examples and I want you guys to note like strengths of the poster and then opportunities for that poster to improve. So we're basically going to go through some examples and we're going to point out what this poster, what looks good on this poster, what you think is a strength, and then where you think the poster could be improved to be better, more effective. So we're going to start with this one. So applying the guidelines we discussed, what do you think about this poster? So let's start with the strengths. If anyone wants to talk about something they think looks good on this poster, we could start there.
They use like a good background and font that's like easy to read, and I think they did a good job labeling every section.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It is super readable, and the sections, you can see exactly where each information lies. Anyone else?
There's a lot of like white space, so it isn't super overwhelming to look at.
Yeah, exactly. This one has a really good ratio of not only white space but also the graphics and photos to text. It's really readable. I think the flow is really good also. We start up here and it kind of moves this way down to future work and acknowledgments here at last. So I think that the setup of this poster is really nice. The title's really big at the top. Their information is below it, obviously, but yeah, all of that is really good. Now, does anyone want to point out maybe some opportunities for improvement of this poster?
I would say in the case of this poster, I kind of been missing like a big statement that would kind of explain why this topic is important because it seems like something that's like a science fair project, but when you like actually read the text, it's actually like impactful.
Yeah, that's a really good point to make. Anyone else? Okay, what about the color scheme they used? Would anyone change the color scheme? What do you think?
It's red, so like, and you said that was common for like color blindness and things, so probably something else would have been better.
Yeah, exactly. Although the red looks nice and they keep it consistent because the red kind of matches, the tint of their photos. You really want to stay away from red. So to make this a more effective poster, to make this poster even better than it already is, if you would change this red scheme to another color, whatever you want to use, that would make it that much better. But yeah, this was a really good example. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next one. Okay, so we're going to start with some strengths of this poster. So does anyone want to take a look at it and say what they think looks really good here?
It's really easy to look at and like the pictures are cool.
Yeah, so that was one of the things I noticed. I really like how big the photos are and how they're really neatly aligned. Like you have two in the middle and then these two are pretty much on the same plane. So it has a really nice design with those photos.
I know.
I know that we talked about how a white background would be better, but personally, I kind of like this background because it's not too busy and it actually goes with the theme. So I think it was a good choice.
Yeah, so that's kind of like a personal opinion. Obviously the background is really, really pretty and it looks nice and it goes with the theme. Doesn't make the text harder to read, maybe. So I feel like that could be both a strength of the design, but then also an opportunity to improve would be to change the background in order to better read the text. One of the other strengths that I noticed is the flow. Again, they start here, they have their abstract, their goals, and then description, and then the development and analysis here. But yeah, I think the photo and the design is really nice on this poster. So does anyone want to point out any opportunities for improvement here?
Probably bigger font and bigger like subtitles and things.
Yes, that's probably the first thing I noticed. Especially compared to the poster before here. Let me see if I can get it. The font, the words are really hard to read. So one way I would improve this poster would be to make the font bigger and then also change it to an easier read font that's not as like smushed together, so that way we can read it better. Anything else? Does anyone see?
Maybe this is just my own personal problem or preference, I guess, but like I just like whenever I look at a poster like this, I can't like tell what it's about without like reading through the whole thing. So I feel like I would really like some kind of like broad, big, bold statement that gives a summary.
No, I totally agree, especially here. You're not drawn to a starting point really that tells you exactly what we're talking about here, because if you start in the upper left hand corner, and this doesn't really give you much on like what their research is on. So I think that's a good point. If someone was just walking by, where would they start to try and figure out what's going on? But yeah, those are all really, really good points. So we can go on to another one. Okay, so let's start with the strengths of this one. If anyone wants to point out what they think looks good here.
I think the division of information is good, like the flow feels nice.
Yeah, I agree. I really like how this poster is set up. I really like how the results section is big and full of figures. They start with an intro that's bulleted. Then they have a hypothesis that's completely on its own, so you know exactly what they're trying to figure out, what they think is going to happen. Methods, your results are really big, and then your conclusions and future directions are down here, which is like one of the last things you would look at. So I agree. I think the flow of this is really, really nice. Anyone else?
I really like the title of this poster. I know a lot of times at these conferences or like the showcase that the Office of Undergrad Research hosts, a lot of PIs come to that to potentially look for new undergrads. That's how I met my PI. I was at the showcase. And I know the first thing someone reads about your poster usually, besides looking at the pictures, is the title. And this title tells you exactly what they looked at. And if a PI is there that also studies something similar, it might draw them to your poster like immediately.
Yeah, I agree. And I really like how they have all of their affiliations up here at the top. So they, credited everything that they worked with and not just UK. I also really like the color scheme. Like, this is an example of not a white background that's not distracting, because they still have these boxes in white that you can see and read. The font is really nice, and it's a good ratio of words to white space to data and like pictures. So moving on from that, what do we think could make this poster stronger? these aren't super obvious, so it's okay if you don't notice these. But one thing I wanted to point out with this poster, so this is kind of like what I was talking about with Google Slides and PowerPoint earlier. Sometimes they are a little bit like tech hard to use. And so your formatting can get a little wonky. Most people probably wouldn't notice this, but if you notice, like, for example, the hypothesis, how the bullet point, the words are like off to the left. This happens a lot in PowerPoint and Google Slides. I swear it has a mind of its own. They'll just like, your stuff will like move around. I don't know why. But one thing I noticed about this poster is if you look at all the heading boxes, like these blue squares, they're all different sizes. Like this acknowledgements one is really thick. The conclusions is small. Methods is a little thicker. I would personally try and make all of these really consistent. There's like a way when you click on the box, you can set it to a specific dimension. So you can set all of them to that same dimension. That way you don't have to worry about like dragging them to make them the exact same size. Another thing I noticed is these boxes aren't, this is being super nitpicky too. This is just something to remind you all to like look at this when you're doing your last glance at your poster. These boxes aren't all in a straight line. How your conclusion is off to the left a little bit, the methods is off to the right. This is just something I would look at before turning a final poster in. Same with over here. Your results like heading box isn't exactly like fitting the box below it. But this is super tiny, like small things. This is still a really great, effective poster. But that's just something to remember, is to look at those things. That's why, you know, creating a poster is a pretty heavy project, because once you get all your information in there and all the content, you think you're ready to go, but you also have to look at some of these little design details too. So I think that does it for that one. Okay, so I think this is the last one. Does anyone want to start with a strength of this poster?
It has a big title.
That is a really great strength. The title pops out at you. It's black, it's bold, it looks good. Anything else? I would say it has a lot of pictures, a lot of graphics, which is a really strong point of a poster. But let's maybe talk about some of the opportunities for improvement here.
There's a lot of text.
Yes. Like I said, there's a lot of images, but they're really small. And so they're kind of overrun by the text. And instead of the images or the text supporting the images, here it kind of seems like the images are just supporting the text. Anything else?
I like how they have the arrows, but it's lacking to me, like, I don't know where to start on this one. And there's also no UK affiliations.
Exactly. Yeah, so I don't think this poster came from UK, but it does not have an affiliation on it, which is required. So if you're making a poster, it does need to have your affiliation somewhere in
It did have an affiliation, but it was blurred out under the black box because they didn't want the affiliation to be known either.
Right. But like Katie said, she didn't know where to start. There's really not a good flow here. Like, there's no direction that the boxes are going. We don't really know where to start, where to end. Anything else? Does anyone else want to point out something?
It's very colorful.
Yeah, so there's not really one color scheme. Also, it uses that red-green tone, which isn't the best. The background's solid, but it's not white. It's not horrible, but I think their problem is mainly the font size. I think the font size needs to be larger, and I think they need to scale back on text in order to be able to read it better. One thing I also really like is whenever you can read a subheading really well. And so you know what section you're reading. And these subheadings are barely, if any, bigger than the normal text. And so that's kind of something that I would improve here, is to make the subheadings larger so that you know what each box is talking about easier. And so I think that does it here. Like, we really want to scale back on text, larger images, easier to read. You want some kind of flow. It doesn't have to be, you know, that up and down. It can be any way you want it, but it has to have some sort of direction. And one color scheme, easier to read font. And I think that would be the improvements I would make here to make this a stronger poster. But thank you guys for your input. That was really, really good. So does anyone have any questions?
Would you ever put a glossary on a poster if you're using like a lot of words that maybe like a lay audience wouldn't understand?
I haven't seen a glossary on a poster personally. I probably wouldn't, just because you're probably not going to have room. You're allowed to use terms that are specific to your research, because you will be presenting it and you can talk about that stuff.
Okay.
Because I wouldn't necessarily make your poster towards like a lay audience, because they have come to this like research symposium to learn about research. They know what they're getting into. But I would try to make it less complex. You know, if you're using a sentence and you're using 10 of the 15 words in that sentence are things that people aren't going to understand, that might be hard for anyone to read, even if they do know what those words are. So just kind of keep that in mind, but I wouldn't necessarily avoid terms that are specific to what you're doing, because those are important to use.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I've also seen students use QR codes where they can scan it and then link. So if you have a glossary, then that may be an option too.
Right, yeah. Some of those like Morrison ones have QR like on the template area, like, or a place to put it. That's kind of like a newer thing. But I think it's really cool. So if there's stuff that you want to have but don't have room for on your poster, you can put it on a link and put a QR code on there.
I had a question. I didn't know that like the Office of Undergrad Research did stuff like this, like little presentations. Is there any kind of interactive workshop that would like help us review our posters before we present? Like where we could kind of like share our posters and get feedback?
I don't think we have one planned, but Jesse, that might be something that we could talk about.
Yes, because we have these amazing research ambassadors, Franny and Katie, that love to give peer-to-peer feedback. Don't you, ladies?
Ew, I love it.
They do. But they're also, we could schedule like a drop-in session. So it's not necessarily like a 1 hour session. We also had a student last fall that emailed, what was it, an abstract? What did he email?
Yeah, it was an abstract.
Yeah, just to get their feedback on that. So that could also be an option.
Okay. I was just curious if there was like anything planned or okay.
We can plan it. I'm more than happy to set it up, but then you're also able to contact them as well.
Yeah,
Okay, awesome.
honestly, that'd be something I would be interested in too, because I'm going to be working on a new poster here soon, so I would love feedback as well.
Other questions? Do you all have any questions about presenting, doing a poster presentation versus an oral presentation, and how different those look like? Are you all just overwhelmed by presenting in general?
I guess I have another question. Sorry, I keep talking. Like when we present at Incur this year, it'll be like fully online. I'm assuming that's what this is for. Or I don't know, or some people will be there. But like when people pop into our little chat room, like will they start asking us questions or will we just like start presenting? Like how does that work?
So I have presented at multiple in person and only a few virtual. And that was something I was going to bring up. You kind of just have to go with the flow, because some people will come up to your poster in person. Some people will come up to your poster, look at it, not say a word, and walk away. Or some people will just come up and before they even start looking, they're like, tell me about your research. So usually what I do virtually is, I'm not sure if Incur, I know some conferences I've done virtually, like you do a art audio narration type thing that they can like play when they look at your e-poster. But for ones that I've just like sat in a Zoom room and waited for people to come in, I'm usually just like, hey, how are you? If you have any questions about my research, I'd be happy to answer them, any specific questions, or I can walk you through pretty much what we do and kind of let them decide. And that's how just I've been doing it.
Okay, thank you. That makes me feel better because I feel like it'd be awkward.
Sometimes it is, but you'll get through it.
Yeah, I haven't presented virtually yet. I've presented in person, and it is a little different. Like Katie said, sometimes someone will want to hear your whole spiel. Sometimes people will read it on their own and have their own questions. Virtually, I'm assuming it'll work similarly. Like some people will come in and just want to look and maybe just hear in on what you're saying to someone else already, and then some people might want to stick around and ask questions.
Well, I was looking at Incur's presentation schedule, and it looks like you all may be scheduled to actually present rather than just stand or just be available. I'll be sending all of the students who are accepted to Incur the agenda links, so you all can be prepared to know when you're supposed to present, but it looks like it will actually be like a scheduled presentation. So, yay. Other questions? You all are asking good questions.
How would an oral presentation differ from a poster presentation, since you brought it up earlier?
Katie or Franny, y'all want to do that? Or do you want me to?
I can talk about it. I know Franny's you've done some oral, right?
Yeah, but you can go ahead and then I'll follow up.
So basically, like, I've always been taught, like with a poster presentation, you kind of have your whole spiel about your whole poster that you have ready if people just come up and say, tell me about your research, and you start and you tell them about your whole poster. It's usually like a 3 to 5 minute elevator talk, because you don't want to keep them at your poster for like 20 minutes. They'll lose interest very fast. So from all the oral, I've only done, I think, 2 oral presentations, but there's usually like a time frame that you have to stick to. And I would say, at least for me, oral presentations, there's not as much information on a poster or on a slide that you get, because some presentations you get 1 slide and that's all you get, because you really want the people to be listening to you talk instead of like reading your poster the entire time. Franny, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think that's important. I think with a poster presentation, you have not really a clutch, but you have something there that a lot of your information is on. And so your talk doesn't have to be, it's really short, and it doesn't have to be as like exactly what you're doing, because, it's all written there. But an oral presentation, I think, should be more like, I'm trying to think of how to put it. You need to touch on all the bases, because it's not going to be right there for someone to like go back and read. But you also need to be engaging, because they don't have anything to like kind of direct their attention at. So an oral presentation, I think, needs to be, a poster presentation also needs to be rehearsed, but an oral presentation really needs to be down pat so that you know what you're talking about.
Thank you.
I'll just add that like for showcase and Incur oral presentations, you actually can have, you can use 3 to 4 or 3 to 5 slides with simple graphics and minimal information, like what Franny and Katie were saying. So you really have to be confident and strong in presenting your research. Whereas with the poster presentation, it's all right there, and you're just presenting it and not reading your poster. So you've got some slides to use for your oral presentation versus the poster. Okay.
That was a good question.
Does anyone have any questions about just getting started and planning your posters? Or are you all thinking, oh my gosh, I'm doing all of this research. Like, how in the world am I going to consolidate all of this into a poster? First and foremost, breathe.
Also, odds are your PI has a lot of experience with undergrads. I know my PI, we have other undergrads in the lab, and they give them examples of like previous undergrads, what they presented in their posters. And these PIs have gone to many conferences, and they know like what a typical poster looks like. So just they can give a lot of good advice too.
Yes, definitely don't be afraid to ask for help from the professor that you're working with. Or even, I know a lot of people work under grad students too. They're always happy to help.
And we have, for everyone that attended the workshop today, I will be emailing you a PDF of the slides, as well as a link to last year's showcase, student showcase posters and oral presentations, so you can actually see an example of different posters, and you can click by different disciplines to see specifically whether you're engineering or physics or medical or design or whichever discipline. So you can see specifically whether it was oral or poster presentations, just to get some ideas from that. And then we'll also be posting this video to our YouTube channel as well. So we're trying to give you these resources. And then our website also has the templates available that you can download and edit and tweak to, to meet your needs. And then we're here as well to answer any and all questions. And then Franny and Katie are always available as our ambassadors to help you and guide you in this process too. So any other questions, you all? Has this been helpful or overwhelming and scary?
I thought it was really helpful. Thank you guys.
Okay. Our pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, if you all don't have anything else, thank you for being here. Thank you, Franny and Katie, for your help, Franny. Great job. And then look for the email with the PDFs and the links to the sample posters and templates by Friday. Okay? All right. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your week. Stay warm and let us know if we can help. We're here. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for an excellent presentation.
Thanks, Chris or Dr. Crawford.